Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Undiluted Word podcast. Today, I have a very good friend of mine. Her name is Hibo, and we've known each other for about 8 years now. I think it's been a while.
Yeah, hey, been ages.
Honestly. Yeah, we went to sixth form together and we have been on countless brunch trips over the past few years.
Too many.
It's so lovely to have you on here today, Hibo. I'll let you just introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, hey, it's Hippo. Yeah, I've been, as Dara said, been friends since like 8 years back when we were in sixth form, little babies, and IB was like stepping on our necks. So yeah, I've graduated. I did psychology at uni and I worked in marketing research for a while. And now I've moved into tech and I work as a front-end engineer. And yeah, I just couldn't wait to be on your podcast.
Lovely. It's so lovely to have you on here, and I'm excited to just go into the topic and discuss what we have with everybody else. So, today we are going to talk about horoscopes, and as you might have been able to tell from the episode title, the stars are not aligned. Breaking news, they are not aligned. Okay. So, we're just going to go into a bit more about that. So, just sit back, enjoy yourself, and feel free to take any notes. And yeah, I'm going to start off with some icebreaker questions. So, Hibbo, do you know what your star sign is?
Yeah, I'm an Aries baby, born in March 26th. They tried to change my star sign to Pisces, but that's not happening. I'm staying Aries.
Aries for life.
Yeah, the ram.
Wait, I don't even know what my thing is. I
What are
think it's a
you?
crab. Cancer.
Oh, crab.
Is that a
Crab.
crab? It's a crab. I think it's a
A
crab.
crab is so rubbish. What's a crab?
And then when I heard the name Cancer, I was just like, I
Yeah,
don't know about that.
mm,
It's a bit weird.
yeah.
Have you ever checked your horoscopes at all?
Yeah, I used to when I was young, like quite a lot. Like in the little like childhood like magazines or the ones you get from like the news agents that were like for
Yep.
teens. They
Yep.
used to be like, oh, what's happening in my life this month, this week?
Who's gonna fall in love with me?
You know? Oh my God, I'm gonna have a big break. Like, I don't know why I believed all that stuff.
Honestly, yeah, it's so weird because I feel like when you're younger, you just sort of get caught up with it all, and it's just like, wow, it's interesting and exciting. So, what were your initial thoughts about horoscopes, and maybe how has that changed?
Yeah, so I don't know. It was fun. It was new. It was like, oh my God, something can tell me like things about my life. Like,
Mm,
so I believed it quite easily. And I feel like it was a time where like other people my age were also like reading it and like
yeah,
believing it and just talking about it as like a topic of conversation. So yeah,
yeah.
at that time in my life, definitely. But then as I've moved on, it's just like, yeah, it's not real. It just doesn't make any
Bye.
sense. The stars don't tell you anything.
At
Like,
all.
yeah, so that's where I'm at now.
Okay, thank you. So, just so that everyone is on the same page as us in terms of what we mean and what we are going to be talking about, astrology is like the ancient belief that a person's destiny can be found in the patterns of the stars and the planet at the time that they were born. And yeah, they believe that the alignment of the stars and the planet at that specific time can then determine a person's mood, their personality, and environment. And this will then probably be the same as everybody born around the same time as you are. And that's how the horoscopes were then sort of formed. And that is based on this sort of like sun sign system. And horoscopes actually became quite popular after they started being printed in newspapers in the 1930s. But as Hibo sort of said, like over time, it's now something you see a lot in social media. Like, I don't think I go through a whole day or a week maybe without seeing a few like, oh yeah, this is me because that's my star sign, or I'm not allowed to interact with this type of person because their star sign like opposes my star sign. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's quite interesting to see how it's become so popular and it's part of like our day-to-day living. Well, a fun fact about Hibbo, which I'll say, is that
Oh,
she is a twin.
yeah.
And yeah, so obviously I said that astrology looks at like the time that you were born, and you have a twin. How similar would you say in terms of your moods, personalities? Are there differences, or do you think your stars are aligned?
Oh, linking back to the title. Look at you, a pro. Um, yeah, we're very similar, like personality wise.
Hmm.
like we both love food. We both love like we're more indoor people, introverts than like out extroverts. We like, I don't know, the same shows, you know, a lot of similar things, but there are like a lot of differences too. So like clothing style is a big one that's different. Like I like more colorful statement, like kind of like things in my outfits, but she likes more, you know, black, gray, beige, you know, like I don't know. To me it's bland, but she wouldn't call it that. It's like, I don't know, more sophisticated, I guess.
Okay.
She's like that type of style. Or like just like I think I'm more of the maybe the less serious, goofy kind of twin. And she's more serious, like less goofy. But I don't know, Dara, you know us. What do you think?
I feel like you are quite different, especially because I spend a lot of time with you. So I'm able to tell like, okay, how you are, your personality. And I do think you do have like different personalities. Yeah, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because I just feel like everyone is different and there's different things that make you so individual. So yeah, when I have this whole, oh yeah, astrology, you're gonna have the same moods and personality traits. It's a bit like, oh, I think sometimes it is possible and you do find people that you do click and you somehow happen to be born around the same time. But I don't think it's like a whole blanket image that
Exactly. Yeah. If two twins that are like 100% genetically identical aren't even the same, how can you be the same as someone just born in the same like month or two as you? Like,
exactly.
On the other side of the world and everything. Like
different
it
age.
doesn't make
It could
sense.
be like 20 years older than you or like a lot younger than you as well. So
you know?
Yeah. So yeah, we also sort of considered, why do we think horoscopes are so fascinating and like why are people so intrigued to look into them? A few things that came to my mind is that people really want to know. They crave knowledge about the future and what it holds, or like they want confirmation about maybe what they already sort of believe or think. And yeah, I think there's just that craving for wisdom more than they already have now, because a lot of people might feel like they don't know where they're at in life and they want some type of guidance. Do you have any ideas as to why other people might be looking to horoscopes?
Yeah, it's similar to what you said. Like, I think people like control in their life, or like the idea that they have control in aspects of their life. So the more that they feel like they can be aware of like external forces, the more they can feel like they have more control on like their career or their relationships, because they can kind of see what's coming up ahead. But I think it's also like not everyone's like religious, right? But I feel like everyone has a spiritual side to them at least. So I feel like those people that have tapped into a spiritual side, at least those who aren't religious, horoscopes can be a way of them trying to understand their spirituality, what they the connectedness that they feel to some like higher level or higher being. I don't know. It doesn't really explain people who are religious who might believe in it, but I feel like there can be some explanation for people who aren't religious, but like choose like believe in horoscopes.
Definitely. Okay. So we've sort of introduced the topic to you and said a few of our thoughts and opinions so far. And what we now want to do through the rest of this episode is enlighten and educate you about horoscopes, looking at it from a like psychological aspect, which Hibo will talk about, and then I'll move on to also talk about some spiritual elements to it. So off you go, Hibo. Enlighten us.
Okay. So disclaimer before I start going into the psychological explanation. We're not trying to bash anyone for believing in horoscopes or reading horoscopes. This is just more for educational or just to discuss, you know, what they are or how they're like formed. So please don't take any offense at today's discussion.
Because we've looked at them in the past as well. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I looked into psychological explanations of like horoscopes and why horoscopes can be so believable. And it actually comes down to something called the Barnum effect. And the Barnum effect, which is also called the Forer effect, it's a cognitive bias that describes a tendency to accept personality descriptions as if they apply to us, even though they're really vague. So it's basically really vague statements that can be interpreted in any type of way by any individual, so that the individual believes it because, you know, they interpret it in a subjective way. Cognitive biases, if you don't know, is like a general kind of category of biases, and it refers to how people frame information that they encounter to fit their worldview. So like one example that like I think a lot of people know is that the confirmation bias, right? So like the when you tend to listen more to information that confirms your worldview,
Yeah.
and you tend not to listen to information that doesn't confirm your worldview.
Yeah.
So Barnum effect is like under that category of cognitive biases. And it was identified from a experiment by the psychologist Bertram Forer, which is where the name comes from.
Yeah.
And he asked students in his psychology class to complete a personality test. And then a week later, he came back to them and said, okay, here's your personality sketches, your results from the test. And it contained 14 sentences that he said summed them up from the test.
Okay.
And then he asked them to read the sketch and then rate the accuracy of the sketch from a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being most accurate, 1 being least accurate. And he found that most of them rated it at like 4.3 was the average. So like high, basically they were rating it as accurate. But the catch was he gave them all the same personality sketch. So obviously it's not accurate because everyone got the same thing. And he actually said, I think that he got it from an astrology book or like some sort of astrology horoscope. Book, let's say. Basically, I've got some examples from the experiment to read out loud right now that kind of explain how vague they were.
Okay.
So one was, you can be overly harsh on yourself and very critical. But like, what does overly harsh mean? And what does very critical mean?
Honestly,
everyone can feel that
I can say yes to that for sure.
Could be overly harsh. But then I could be like, no, Dara, I don't think you're an overly critical person. But then you could think you're an overly critical person, right?
Because
and another one,
yeah,
exactly. And another one was, sometimes you give too much effort on projects that don't work out. Who doesn't feel like they put in a lot of work to something that didn't work out? Like, it applies to everyone. Again, what is too much effort, you know? And
I think the fact that the statement says it makes me immediately, when you said that, I started thinking of times when I put too much effort into something. So almost in a way, I'm like looking for something to be like, yeah, that's me. I've done that before.
Yes, confirmation bias. You're trying to find things that, because you've been told that this is you, you're already starting to believe it, right? So you try to find information that confirms that view, and you're not thinking of information that doesn't confirm the statement, only ones that would, because... And I think it also comes back to like authority, right? So this is a psychology professor that's given them this information, and he says that it was calculated from their personality test. So I think there's that extra layer of like, oh, it's a science and it's been calculated, you know? All these factors just get them to believe that it's real. And overall, what does this tell us, right? So I think what's important about this effect, that number one, it only works if the statements are positive and complementary. So like, if the feedback on this personality test were negative, no way would people say that, you know, that is an accurate description of me. If you said you're a mean person, you don't treat your friends well, like you need to have more respect for elders, like no one's going to say that that's true. So that's one key thing to look out for, is just how positive the statements are, not just like their vagueness. And people, I think, just in general, just love to be complimented in our nature. We're more likely to believe the statements because they kind of appease our ego, and they like big us up in a way. So we just need to be careful of believing things because they make us, you know, look in a positive light.
It's sort of like deception in a way, like self-deception. That's not cool.
And everyone's like guilty, but everyone's capable of it. I think it's like human nature, right? It's like instinct. So earlier this week, me and Dara pulled out pictures of like horoscopes. So she pulled out a Gemini one, Cancer, sorry, and I pulled out an Aries one. So I actually looked at the pictures we got, and I pulled out some statements from each of those that I think could be ones that are Barnum effect statements.
Okay.
So I'll start with yours. Yours said, they need connection and to feel that they belong to others, partnerships, and in community. What do you think about that statement? I feel like that's such a sweeping statement.
It's sweeping. It really is. And I feel like, I need connection, but who doesn't feel like they need connection?
Right.
And being a part of a community, whether it be like a church community or like uni.
Exactly. There's so many different communities that you'd want to belong in. Yeah. And I feel like this one actually fits to another thing. The reason I pulled this out is because this specific statement, I think, fits in with something else in psychology, which is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know if we did that back in IB. I don't know if you know of it,
We
Dara.
did it, and I actually learned that on my course, the
Oh,
master's I
cool.
just finished. Yeah, it was very
Yeah.
interesting actually. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically a pyramid,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of split into three sections. So the bottom rung of the pyramid is like your basic needs. Then the
Yeah.
middle part is like your more personal needs.
Mhm.
And the top is like self-actualization needs.
Yeah.
So like you always have to start from the bottom. So if you don't have your basic needs, and that's where like a human's at. So that's the needs that they're trying to fulfill in
Mhm.
their life. And then it kind of goes up from there. But I thought it was interesting because belonging is actually, I think, the bottom, either the basic or the personal one. So
Yeah.
like that's literally a human need. You know
Human
what I
need.
mean? Like
Everyone
it's the
needs it.
most sweeping type of statement you can make because
Yeah.
connection is one of those basic ones,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I picked that one out. And I'll tell you like the couple that I picked out from the Aries horoscope.
What did you think about?
So they will not hide from a reality that is staring them right in the face.
Ooh.
This one, yeah, I'm not even gonna lie, I don't know what that means. Why do I have to do like mental gymnastics to think, what is this telling me?
It makes you look like really mysterious.
You know? Yeah, quite elusive, quite interesting person.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting how they wrote certain things where it said like flirting with the boundaries of rebellion. Are you flirting with the boundaries
Mm.
of rebellion?
Am I, Dara? Am I? Would you say I am? I have no idea, but I don't know. Like I could be.
I feel like if someone read that and they, as we said earlier, you try and figure out ways in your life, maybe you've tried to maybe adhere to that sentence or
Mm.
whatever, just because I think it doesn't necessarily mean it's negative, or it doesn't really necessarily say it's positive either. So then you just sort of decide whether or not you want to associate that as part of being your identity, which is
Mm.
obviously where we can obviously go wrong.
Exactly.
Pick random statements. Yeah.
Yeah, we shouldn't be deciding which ones fit and like deciding which ones don't, you know? The horoscope should tell us exactly what does and doesn't.
If the stars are aligned. Oh.
I love that.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I like that sentence you actually picked up about the community one because it does make sense now when you bring into the whole hierarchy of needs. But
Yeah, and I feel like anybody wouldn't realize that that statement was sweeping because they'll just immediately think of like that statement in relation to their life, right? Like you did with like community, oh, Christian community. So that's how like it gets you, you know?
yeah, definitely.
hmm So yeah, the common theme is just that they distort our thinking, our way of thinking, and they kind of lead to like confirmation bias where we pick out what fits in with ourselves and choose to believe that and go ahead with that. The thing is, it also I keep adding more things,
Okay.
but it also kind of like it boosts your belief in it, right? So like when you read these statements and like some of them fit, some of them don't, like the ones that don't won't make you believe in the horoscopes less, but the ones
Yeah.
that do will make you think, oh my God, these horoscopes are so true. It's always right. Like I'm
Yeah.
gonna get my statement next week, next
Yeah.
month. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's why I decided to stop like looking at them, just because I know that after a while I'm gonna start believing it more, just because it fits that little box that I'm trying to make of myself and who I am. So yeah, that's why I stray away from it as much as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same here.
So thank you so much, Hibo, for giving us the sort of psychological aspects of horoscopes and why we ought to be a bit more careful as to how much we read into them. Yeah. So now we're going to just move on to talk about some spiritual elements of it. At first, you'd be like, horoscopes in the Bible? I don't think so. But what I've been able to see through my own personal study and just previous things I've looked at in the Bible, like this is not a new theme. There are themes of people trying to understand signs in the Bible. And there's some warnings as well that we're given. So I'm just going to sort of share that. And Hibo, feel free to ask any questions or things that you want like clarification on, just because it's like we're all learning here.
Will do.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say in terms of horoscopes is that it's almost like a form of idolatry. And idolatry or having idols is sort of placing something on a high pedestal and you almost in a way worship it. And when you say worship, people are like, oh, I don't worship horoscopes, I don't worship people. But there are ways in which we elevate certain elements of our lives to a higher standard than others. And it means that we elevate it to such a standard that we all our mind and everything that we do is devoted towards that thing. And essentially in the Bible, we're told several times that the God that we serve, who's jealous, he doesn't want you to have other things competing for your love and your love towards him. And so when we look at idolatry and looking at things like horoscopes, how we've said a lot of people turn to them because they feel like, yeah, that's going to give them the knowledge or the insight that they feel like they need. And as a result of that, they start to stray away from maybe the commandments and things that God has already told them in the Bible, the things that God tells them, this is how to live their life. They start to neglect those things and focus on what the horoscopes are telling them, just because someone out there, a scientific being, has said, look, horoscopes are good, the stars are aligned, and this is what we're going to do. So in the Bible, there's a story in Acts. I'm just going to summarize it quickly. Paul, who's sort of like a missionary, he goes to this church in Ephesus, and I'm going to read it out loud to you. And this is Acts chapter 19, verses 17 to 20. It says, this became known both to Jews and Greeks dwelling in Ephesus, and fear fell on them all, and the name of the Lord was magnified. And many who had believed came confessing and telling their deeds. Also, many of those who had practiced magic brought by their books together, burned them in the sight of all, and they counted up to the value of them, and it totaled 50,000 pieces of silver. So the word of the Lord grew mightily and prevailed. So what I want you to pay attention to is the fact that they had all these magic books and things that obviously they've been studying. And this is, in a sense, like ancient astrology, you can say. And when they realized who God was and they've been introduced to Jesus, they then decide to turn away from those things. And this is sort of like a drastic, like, whoa, we've now decided to turn away from these things, even though it says those things were like, they were very expensive. And back in those days, they really hold on to all these like knowledge because it's like, yeah, when we have all this knowledge, we're going to keep hold on to it. But when they now understand who God is, they decide, no, there's no need for us to have all these sort of things because it sort of separates them from who God is. And that moves on to my next point in terms of horoscopes and looking at astrology to help explain who we are, sort of separates us from God. Earlier on in like Leviticus 19 verse 31, it says, do not turn to mediums or necromancers. Do not seek them out, and so make yourselves unclean by them. I'm the Lord your God. And it also says, don't turn to them, because it's saying that God wants you to be separate unto him. And by turning onto them, you're now involving other things that God doesn't necessarily want to be a part of who we are in him. And in another translation, it says sanctify yourselves. And when we look at the word like sanctify, it talks about like being set apart. And I think that was very important because even though a lot of people are looking at horoscopes and it seems like a popular world culture and everyone loves it, it's like, yeah, let's get into it. It's not harmless, or it appears harmless. There's that responsibility to still be set apart from what the world seems is normal and acceptable. Yeah, and so those are like two important aspects of like our walk. God doesn't force us to be separate to him, but he wants us to work with him. And so that means we need to cooperate with him as well, not be cooperating or involving ourselves with things that will draw us further away from him. Yeah. And I think another point that I was thinking of was the fact that looking at horoscopes is very offensive to God, because as we said earlier, you're seeking out knowledge from other things. And countless times in the Bible, and I'm sure Quran as well, you have instances where you're told that there are ways you have like sort of instructions and guidance from that. And so it's like, if you've been given all this guidance, why are you then seeking other means of being guided? In a way, you have your creator, someone that's made you. And now instead of going to the same person that's made you for guidance and talking directly to that person, you've decided to go to something else that they themselves have made to get your guidance from. And it's just like, that's not cool. Yeah. I think in the Bible, we have many times where God has told you his will and ways to understand the will and what he has for you in life. And so when you're looking at horoscopes, it's like, no, God has told you, you can look at my word, you can talk to other people through communication with me. I can tell you what you want. So it's like, I'll rather go directly to God and get something specific to me and not somebody that's just born in the same on the same day as me. Yeah. One more instance that there is in the Bible, which I think is even a funny illustration of what can happen when you try and look at horoscopes and then religious practices. In the book of Daniel, you have some writing on the wall, and this king is confused. His name is King Nebuchadnezzar. He's confused, like, oh, what's this? What's this writing? I don't understand what's going on. And I think previously as well, he also has this dream and it's very confusing, but he needs people to explain it to him. And so he gets all these like astrologers and people that can read signs and times and things like that. And basically like scientists of those days. And he gets them all together and he's like, okay, can you please help me interpret what this dream means or these writings on the wall? And none of them are able to understand what it says. But then this person who's like a man of God, he comes and God helped him to be able to understand it. So it just reiterates again that God is like the height of all knowledge. And so it's better to go to him to get wisdom than to just consult in all these other means. Yeah. So those are the points I got in terms of looking at horoscopes and from a Christian perspective or just a religious point of view, why we ought to be a lot more careful. And one thing I know is that the enemy will try to use any way or form to lead us astray. And so the way we've seen all these statements about our star signs, some of these things, obviously, they haven't been too like bad. But imagine if something was like, I don't even know. Imagine if one of them said like, you're going to die on so day. And it's just like, whoa, gory. But some people might be like, yeah, definitely, that's not me, blah, blah, blah. But other people, if they hold that so dearly, it's going to affect the way they live their life up until that moment in time. And that robs you of the peace that is freely available to us if we didn't decide to be looking at all these other mediums to try and understand ourselves and God's will for us. When I was preparing this, I came up with this little quote, and I'll leave that to end my little section. Instead of looking at the stars for signs, look to the one who made them and he will guide you.
Oh, love that. Yeah. I love that religious perspective that you brought. That there's so many parallels to Islam there, and the idea generally just comes down to you shouldn't be like prescribing partners to God, right? God is the only one that is capable of all of this. And there's so many like, it reminds me of, the whole idea that, this world is a test, right? To test our faith and our degree of faith in God. Yeah. And there's lots of like temptations and like things out there to test that, right? Yeah. One of them being horoscopes, but like it might seem really like trivial or small, but that's one of the biggest things you could do is say that something else can do something that only God can do. Yeah. Like in Islam, I think like the top worst sin like is what we call shirk, which is basically the category of idolatry comes under that, but it's prescribing partners to God. Like it's the top worst thing. So even something as small as a horoscope and reading it and believing it and using it in your life as a Muslim person, I'm sure it's the kind of the same for Christians too, but from a Muslim perspective, is like it's such a big thing. Like
it is.
It's kind of the foundation, we believe in one God, one thing.
Not several in the
not something to be taken lightly, from a religious perspective. Which I think your examples also highlighted, with the Ephesians and burning all of their books and stuff. It's such a grave thing. They even got rid of everything. All of the things that people took time to like create and make and study, they got rid of it as soon as, God proved his power, right? That's how big a thing it is.
It is, yeah. And so on that note, get rid of all these things that if you follow like 10 different horoscope pages or you like, you follow them on Twitter or wherever, try and get rid of them because that's like a drastic action to show that, you don't want to be involved in that because the line is so blurry in how you can just slip into it and not know how much you are now internalizing all that you are looking at.
Yeah. And I also agree with your point on like how it takes you away from God. Like it has that side as well. Like if you think about your spirituality and how much connection you feel to God, right? If you're believing in horoscopes and all these other external forces, that part of that connection you feel to God, you're prescribing that connection to these other things, right? So it's like, say it was at 80%, like maybe like you've taken 20 or 10% off that and now you're putting that towards this horoscope or the stars that you feel a connection to, when really it's you've misplaced it, right? So I agree with that point as well. Like just a analogy that kind of just came into my head when you were speaking.
Yeah. Thank you. Really, I love having conversations with you because it's like we get ideas or come together.
We really get into it. Yeah.
So let's conclude and tell people the main undiluted word points from this episode.
Mm-hmm. So my main take home point is it kind of relates to what you said a little bit, but first from a psychology perspective is to think about how horoscopes like are distorting your thinking and what you're choosing to believe versus what you're not choosing to believe, and just to be careful with how much you believe things at face value, and just to basically examine it. But then the other point was just to think about what's missing in your life, like your relationship, your career, like what's missing that's making you turn to horoscopes for that kind of sense of control or whatever it is. Yeah, I feel like there's an underlying need that's maybe not being met. So just try and think about, what is that need? Is it control? You want more control in your life? Try and find other ways to get that control and not turn to horoscopes.
Yes, lovely. Very nice and sweet. What is my concluding point? Don't be focusing on things that God has made to help you know how to do life. Yeah. I'm just going to end with a little prayer just for us to round this all up. Dear Jesus, thank you for this opportunity for us to talk about horoscopes and to just share with everyone what they mean and how they could be so impactful in our life from a psychological aspect, also from a spiritual aspect. May we learn how to be careful about what we place above you in life, and also how we maybe idolize certain things in our life as well. Be with us all in this area of our life. Amen. That is all. Just a disclaimer, we are not crucifying anyone that does look at horoscopes. Just once again, just want you to feel enlightened about it and just to look into a bit more about the practice of looking at horoscopes. Yeah.
Yeah, +1.
We said earlier that Hibo, we go out to eat a lot. So Hibo, do you want to tell everyone your Insta?
Plug, thank you. Yeah, it's at foodconquest_ on Instagram. Yeah, just sampling the best halal vegan restaurants in London and sharing my experiences, and for you guys, so that you don't have to waste your money at places that, don't deliver the quality.
Exactly.
So I got you.
She's not responsible for any problems with your bank account when you do eventually go to everywhere on the list. And yeah, don't forget again to follow on Instagram, the undiluted word _. And I would also like to hear your thoughts about horoscopes and how it has maybe changed from listening to us talk about them. So feel free to send me a DM on Insta. And don't forget to check out blog posts on theundilutedword.com. Yeah. Thank you once again, Hibo, for being with me on this episode, talking about the stars which are not aligned.
You're welcome.
Hopefully we can hear from you some other time in the future. But till you hear from me again, bye.